Thanks. And how real was that kids' talk, hey? It's I don't know whether we needed great acting or not. It's so true. It brings back memories. And it's real of how we covet. So that's what we're looking at this morning. It's a really challenging topic. We're continuing the New City Catechism. We're at the last of the commandments, the final 2 commandments today. We've spent quite a few weeks looking at the 10 commandments, and they're helpful for us to live in response to God's faithfulness. The next few questions in the coming weeks will help us see how the law points us to see our need for grace. It's going to help us understand the point of the law. We need grace. The point of the law isn't about obedience, but it's showing our great need for grace. Now, at the end of the sermon this morning, I've got time for a couple of questions. So if you think of some questions to do with the topic we're looking at today on these 2 final commandments, then we'll have time for 2. So let's look at these final 2 commandments. Thanks, Sim, up there on the screen. The final 2 commandments. I think these are fairly straightforward, these commandments, and what they are. They're just hard to live, aren't they? That we do not lie, that's what it means, and that we are content, not envying anyone and anything else. They relate to the last of the 10 commandments. And we often think of the 9th commandment simply as do not lie. Keep our words true. And that really is the essence of the 9th commandment. But within the 10 commandments, that one is specifically written in the context of a courtroom. Witnesses were everything in the ancient world. Today we have other things like audio recordings and video and DNA, fingerprints, but they didn't have any of that. And back then, eyewitnesses was the main thing in a courtroom. And if someone stood up to accuse someone of wrongdoing, and a second person added to that witness, then their words carried great weight. And so it's important to understand the context of this commandment was primarily within a courtroom. It's do not lie. It had great significance for justice, for God's justice amongst his people. But as we know, Jesus intensified these commandments. They're not just an external action. For instance, murder is one way of breaking the 6th commandment, but when we're angry at someone, we also break that commandment. He also says adultery is one way of violating the 7th commandment, but Jesus says if you lust after someone internally, then you've also broken that commandment. And so it is with the 9th commandment that we're looking at now. Yes, you can bear false witness in a courtroom, in a court of law, but how we use our words every day also matters. And the why we use our words matters. It deals with all manner of words that we use to lie or deceive. You probably know that old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's not true, is it? It's a great lie in and of itself. Lies hurt people deeply. This commandment was meant to protect marriages, protect property, to protect life and honour and all relationships. Now, it's interesting that we see a number of examples of lies in the Bible. We see serpent, the first liar, in the Garden of Eden. That was a very important lie for Adam and Eve, and they listened. Jacob lied, Laban lied, and even a lie led to Jesus being crucified. You might know of Ananias and Sapphira in the book of Acts. They told just a little lie. They sold some property and gave the proceeds to the church. Now, that's obviously a good thing to do, but they lied about how much they gave. They said they gave the whole amount, and yet they gave half. And so they were killed for lying. We too treat our words carelessly, casually. We twist our words to mean what we need them to mean at a certain time. Not really, certainly not always, what we should say. And we don't even have to try to do this. We do this naturally as people, sinful people. We're masters of passing along our interpretation of events as if we know the whole truth and only the whole truth. And whether we realise it or not, and especially when we're in a conflict with someone, We just know how to pass along information that suits our agenda and not listen well. This is why you need to agree with me, these words are saying. I'm sure you know what I mean. Politicians do this. We hate it when politicians don't say what they need to say. And yet the reality is we do it just the same. You see, we break this commandment lots of ways. We break it when we gossip and slander. Gossip is that passing along of a rumour that's not substantiated. Gossip can be more than that too. We can say true things unnecessarily. I think we often do that in prayer. Christians, we pass along information in prayer points when we don't have any reason to pass that information along. It's usually said in the context of, well, let's just pray about this. Now, yes, there are some grey areas in this. It's good to pray for others, but are we sharing for their benefit or for our benefit? Here's a question to think of for yourself when you might be tempted to do this. Would that person be happy if I was sharing this information about them now? Would they be happy? Probably not. There are times to hold our tongue, isn't there? Proverbs 18 verse 8 talks about the gossiping and the news, how we love to share it. It says, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down into the inmost parts. We consume them. We love it. And what is said often cannot be unheard. It's easy to hear and repeat things that shouldn't be. And sometimes I think we just need to stop and say, please stop. Time out for a second. I'm not sure if we should be having this conversation right now. It might be you being proactive with your words. I don't know if I should be hearing this, if you should be saying this. You know those times when you're silent, and silent can mean acceptance? It implies that at times you're willing to hear it. Sometimes I think we need to be proactive with our words. It's hard to do, and we often do it too late, but maybe we should be a bit more proactive with our words. Maybe we need to say, don't tell me this more often. Well, that's gossiping. We all do it. No one is immune. While gossiping is passing along information that we don't know or true information that's unnecessary, slander goes one step further. It's deliberately passing along false information. Jesus considered this a sin, clear and concise. In Matthew chapter 15, these are the words, you can see the two things we're looking at today. These are the words that he says about this. He says, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart comes all these things: evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft out of our hearts. And here are the two: false testimony, lying, deceiving, and slander. Part of that slander, I think, is assuming false motives in others. It's refusing to give them that little bit of doubt, and so we condemn them with our thoughts. It happens all the time. We might assume someone's angry with us because they didn't speak to you the way that you thought they should, or they're angry because of the way they wrote an email. Now, can you tell if someone's particularly angry by an email? Probably not, unless they say, I'm angry, and they usually don't. See, slander often starts where we give a motive to someone's actions, and then we speak ill of them. This is so easy on social media today, isn't it? We see it repeated over and over again. And one final way I think that we can do this so easily is that some of us are compulsive exaggerators. We just need to exaggerate a story or so. It seems a little thing at first, but it's not. I find this temptation certainly in my own heart lots of the times, exaggerating things that I've done or things that I want to do, things that I will do, activities done, books read, plans ahead, all of this. The question is, are we people who can represent our lives accurately? Can people trust us, even in the smallest of details. You see, this commandment's more than just about not lying. This commandment is about using our words for good. And it's important because that's the very nature of God. God is good. One of the things that God cannot do is lie. It's one of the things that makes him very different to us. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is truth. He cannot deceive. He cannot lie. To speak truth is to speak of God. And conversely, what is the nature of Satan? Well, it is to lie. He's the father of lies, the deceiver. From the very beginning, Satan said to Adam and Eve, did God really say that? He deceived. And he doesn't just use big lies out there, but often subtle half-truths. Shows himself to deceive in small ways. And yet, the clear thing is God invented words. He communicates by words. And when he turns up here on earth, Jesus as the man, he calls himself the Word, communicates with us. God is present here by his word, the word of truth. And so it's important for us to see that truth matters. How we speak, how we hear words, reflect God and his character. So then moving on to the second commandment, the final one this morning, that of coveting. Let me read slowly the 10th commandment, and I think this is probably one of the hardest of the commandments. This is probably familiar, but let's slow down and read it. This is the commandment. It says, you shall not covet your neighbour's house. But they've got a lot of nice stuff, don't they? This large new house, new car, new things. You shall not covet your neighbour's wife. Wow, she's beautiful. I wish I'd married someone like her. Look at him. He's so good with the kids. Or he helps around the house. He does all the stuff I wish my husband did. Do not covet his male or female servant, his ox or donkey. It's not fair that my friends have all the nice stuff and I don't. They go on great holidays. My job is pretty boring. I wish I had things like them. Or anything else that belongs to your neighbour. I wish I could be smart like them. I'd be so much happier if I looked like her. I wish I had a normal family like them. Why is everything in my life so hard when everything else for them looks so easy? See, there's nothing necessarily wrong with noticing other people's possessions and things. There is much to enjoy in this world. God's given us a wonderful world to enjoy. But most of us don't just stop and notice, do we? We don't stop and notice what God has given to others or to ourselves. We notice what God has given to others and think, if only I had that, then I'd be happy. That's what coveting is. It's not the same as having desires. It's not a commandment that prohibits our longing of good things or thinking good things or wanting something even better than what you've got. They're not bad things to do. Jesus knew what it was like to be in times of want and need. In the wilderness he was tempted and he desperately needed God's help during then. In Gethsemane, before his betrayal, he knew what it was like to radically want to change his circumstances. Everything different he wanted. And while on the cross, he knew what it was like to be thirsty and want things to be different, so very different. And yet he knew what it was like, but he did not covet. He had great desires. So it's not about having desires and feelings. I think God has given us those things. I want to say God has in fact given us authority to have desires in its rightful place. If you know the Bible, you know Sarah and Hannah, we see the desire for children was right. It's a good desire, a God-given one. In the book of Song of Songs, we see the need and the desire for sexual intimacy is a good desire. In the book of Proverbs, we see God encourages us to work hard and plan for our future so that we might improve our lives and have finances even to be generous. It's certainly not wrong to want and desire God's gift of the Spirit or the fruit of the Spirit. Now, the Bible doesn't say that our problem is that we desire things. We should desire things. The problem is that we desire the wrong things, or that we desire the good things in the wrong way. C.S. Lewis famously put it this way: the problem is not that we desire too much, but we desire too little. Here's his quote. It's a famous quote. This is what we are like. We are like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because we cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday by the sea. It's far better. We are far too easily pleased. That's what coveting does. It makes our desires God, replaces him. He's right. We so easily want these fleeting things of this world, meaningless pleasures, and God doesn't say to us, shame on you for wanting these things. But he says something radically different. He says, I can give you something so much better than what you can imagine. So much better, so much more long-lasting and meaningful and enjoyable than anything that you could make for yourself. Those mud pies are not worth it. So why is coveting such a problem? Why is it a problem for us? Well, first, we want for ourselves what we see in others. It's more than just thinking I'd like to be better or have something. It's not about the object of itself. It's about the heart, isn't it? Coveting is a heart thing that longs for someone else's things to be your own. It's a problem because of those two words, if only. If only I could have that. If only I could be this. It's the meaning that we put to those things that make up the this and the that, right? If only we get that, then we're happy. And coveting really is a bookend to the first covenant, the first and the last. The first covenant says, you shall have no other gods before me. It's desiring something for meaning to replace God, which won't, but we try. And coveting does very much the same. It's desiring something of this world to replace God and what he's given us. When we covet, we don't believe that God is big enough to help us or even good enough to care. And when we covet, it expresses our lack of trust towards God and what he's given us. We try to have something other than God as the only God in our lives. And so this is really bookending the 10 Commandments, the first and the last. Do not covet comes at the end because it's a fitting summary of everything that's gone before it. It's impossible to covet and love your neighbour at the same time. Love them with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. So as I finish, I'm going to have some questions in a minute, if you've got a question. But I've got 4 quick questions on what it means to covet. I hope these hit your heart this morning. They might expose what we're really like. 4 questions. The first, do you hurt others to get more for yourself? This hurting can involve actions, but more likely it's done with little words, easy words that might hide what you really think. And what about your attitudes and the sighs that you do when someone doesn't do what you want? Give them a big sigh or a look. Do you hurt others because you're not getting what you think you want? I'm sure we do that. Could be neglecting others so that you can have. Second question, are you preoccupied with making and accumulating more things? The thing about possessions is that the more that we own, the more likely that they'll own us. A third, are you unwilling to give up what you already have? Some of us are not interested so much in new and shiny things, but we can't give up the safety and the security of what we already have. This is just like the rich young ruler in the Gospels who came to Jesus and asked, "What can I do? What must I do to inherit eternal life?" I'm sure you know the story. Jesus then lists off the law, the second half of the law: don't murder, don't honour your parents, don't steal. The rich man said, "Yeah, I've done all these things." And what did Jesus leave out? He left off the last covenant, last commandment: do not covet. And Jesus added the one thing that he needed to do, that last commandment. He said, "Go and sell everything that you have and give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven." Are we willing to give up what we have to gain what we cannot lose? Eternity. And finally, fourth, do we grumble about our house, about our spouse, about the quality of your possessions and the general state? Do we grumble about things? I think that shows where our heart is. It's so easy to think that the next thing will make us finally happy. But it hasn't in the past, and it won't in the future. 4 quick questions. Where is your heart this morning with coveting? There's much more to say, but I'm going to leave it there. A New City Catechism question and answer. I think it's good to have a couple of questions now. So any questions on the last 2 of the commandments? We'll just do 2 this morning. 2 questions. Anyone brave enough to ask a question? It's fine. If there's not, you can come and speak to me later. Any burning questions that I've missed? Yep.
How do you differentiate between coveting and having a desire?
Yeah. Okay, so how do we differentiate? How would he know the difference between coveting and having the desire? I think those 4 questions, that's why I put those in at the end. If you ask yourself those 4 questions, then you can see whether it's just a desire, a good thing, or it's turning it into your benefit for yourself. Yeah, so that's what coveting, I think, does, where we think this is going to give us something that we want to be or think we need to be, and that will provide the meaning for it. So we can enjoy lots of things in this world, everything, right? But it's how we attach the meaning to it to make us who we think we want to be. That's coveting.
Is it for us or for others? No,
Yeah.
For us or for others?
A desire for things for others as well, yeah. So I don't know whether we can covet. Can you covet and be generous at the same time? Probably not, but you might be coveting respect and admiration from others. So we can so easily twist it, can't we? That's our hearts, they're deceitful. Yeah. The point of the law is to show our great need for a saviour, isn't it? We won't get this right, but we so easily make it about ourselves. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, to a certain extent, but the main issue is that, say, you have a group of people, if you're fighting for someone else's right,
Yeah.
a group of people for something, whether that is coming as coveting for that group of people, or is individual one, that's the point.
Potentially and potentially not. I think it'll vary between each person is the answer. Yeah. We so easily covet. I think it's the hardest one of the 10 Commandments, the one that we so easily deceive ourselves. And so I think it's something we've got to keep working on. The answer is yes. Yep. Great. Any other question? One more question before we wrap up and sing a couple of songs in response. Hannah, last question.
Would you say there's ever a situation where lying is appropriate?
Yeah. The question is there ever a situation where lying is appropriate? We discussed this at our Bible study this week. And I think the answer is all of these commandments are within the context of having God first and foremost. And so I would say there is a time where I would lie to protect someone. So we talked about this at Bible study, for instance, where if you're at war and you're protecting people's lives, then I would lie to protect them. I think that's the greater good. And so, yes, I think there is a time to understand the whole picture of God's law and what's best there. And I think the answer is when we're asked by someone in authority to do a wrong thing, obeying God comes first. And so that means, I think that means we can disobey authority if it means to disobey God and his commandments first and foremost. Yeah. So it's a complicated answer, and I think Christians have had different answers throughout history, but I would say that there are times to lie to authority if it meant protecting a life or lives.